Welcome back. Today we are going to be covering an article I saw linked on Twitter. This image here is what caught my eye, and let's face it, an image like that gets a lot of people's attention. This person, while possibly not intending to stand out, does in fact stand out. She has quite the eccentric fashion style. Now, I could spend the next 5 to 10 minutes abusing this particular style because of my own personal beliefs on what she looks like, but I don't think that's productive, and I think the article's more interesting. So I would leave it to you, the viewer, to leave comments critiquing her fashion style. The most imaginative will be read out in my next video. The article centers around millennials in their early 20s who are getting sterilized. This is rather interesting. It raises quite a number of questions about ethics and morals and whether or not people in the early 20s can make such decisions, or should be allowed to. The whole body autonomy thing, after all. So let's dive right in, shall we? Why these millennials are choosing to be sterilized in their 20s. We take a look inside the, quote, child-free movement. Caitlin from Philadelphia is absolutely certain she doesn't want children. No way, not a chance in hell. I honestly don't like kids. They're germy and annoying and gross, the 19-year-old explains. Which is a fair point. Humans under 5 are messy, unpredictable things. But then again, most adults never quite grow out of that stage either. Yes, it's everything in that statement this 19-year-old has said is cliché. I know people who were like that when they were 19, who about 5 years later had children, and not by accident. And yes, humans are messy. Generally, it either comes down to commitment to look after oneself and the environment we inhabit, or we just give up. But just because kids have germs, just because kids are annoying, just because kids are gross doesn't mean you shouldn't have them. Kids are only gross and germy if the parent isn't doing an adequate job looking after them. And kids get ill a lot when they're young anyway because their immune system is building, and kids are annoying to you because you think you know it all, and a kid wants to know it all. It just tells me at this stage in your life, you have yet to develop patience. I can give you personal experience on this one, anecdotal evidence. I have 3 nieces and a nephew, and 2 of them ask me a lot of questions. At no point does my patience wear, because I know they only want to know an answer, and I have 12 years on you, young lady. It took me those 12 years to develop the patience needed. Not that any of this is important, really, because you don't want to have kids, and I'm just talking about one's patience, tolerance, and understanding, something which you don't have just yet. And I want to talk more about this child-free movement. What's different for Caitlin is she's so sure kids are off the table, she's considering sterilization. A very dangerous finality, but whatever. The procedure isn't something to be taken lightly. It involves blocking the fallopian tubes, which then prevents the women's eggs from reaching sperm and, yeah, you know, the rest. In the UK, it can be carried out on the NHS under local anaesthetic, but most importantly, it's permanent, or difficult to reverse at the very least. It's not like a vasectomy. It is very different, and far more dangerous and invasive. Some might argue this is a particularly extreme option for someone so young, but Caitlin is unwavering in her opinion. I'm old enough to vote, play the lottery, drive and go to jail. Why can't I decide I don't want kids? She asks. Well, this is interesting, because you can not have children, but sterilization is the extreme measure to not wanting to have kids, which is why it took a young lady going to court to get this to go through, because it is so extreme for someone so young to not want. Which is why a lot of people, much older people, myself included, think, why don't you just practice safe sex? You have facilities available if you accidentally get pregnant, like abortion. If you're willing to go down the invasive route of having your tubes dealt with, then I'm sure you won't mind someone sticking a coat hanger inside you. There is a growing number of men and women in the UK and US who are permanently altering their fertility. This phenomenon, known as the child-free movement, is the subject of a new BBC Three documentary, Young and Sterile, My Choice, exploring why teenagers and 20-somethings are advocating childlessness by choice, despite not already having children of their own. Whether it's a growing trend or not, it doesn't really matter. It is a personal choice. But I think it's one of those things where there are already, as stated, objects in place, facilities, that make it so that people can go without having children. Whether it be forms of protection, of course, abortion as well, which is up to a limit. Unless, of course, you want what was advocated by a party in Sweden, the after-birth abortion, which I think is ridiculous. Post-birth, after-birth, doesn't matter. Today, 1 in 5 British women will never have kids, up from 1 in 10 in the 70s, and despite the number of vasectomies falling nearly 2/3 in the last decade, men are also vocal about their child-free choice. I think there's another trend as to why men are being child-free, or choosing to go their own way. Like 29-year-old Paul Pritchard, for example, whose vasectomy was actually filmed live during the making of the documentary. Oh god. I've never thought of myself as a father, he explains. Children have never factored into any of my long-term life plans. You and I think of life very differently. I plan day at a time, because my existence isn't something I can plan too far ahead, certain circumstances. If you're capable of planning ahead, that's fine, but I think for a lot of people, they don't factor children into it. They factor their life around someone else, potentially, and if children happen to be a part of it in the future, then so be it. It's just one of those things that you then discuss with that person when the time is right. I'm not reading the part about the vasectomy. People who choose to be sterilized are doing so for a whole bunch of reasons, not just out of fear of becoming accidentally pregnant or a father, but you can have an abortion. Are you more afraid of being pregnant or killing it? Terminating. And for me, it would definitely be being a father. I am not father material. This is actually coming from someone who doesn't want to have kids at this point. If I did, maybe in 10 years' time, who knows? I don't know where I'll be then. I'm not stupid enough, naive enough to think for 1 second that at any point in my life I will not become a father because I don't like kids now. I have 3 nieces and a nephew. I don't mind children. As stated, genetics is a key factor. Caitlin has mental health problems and a serious heart defect she doesn't want to pass on. Let's see, there's dyslexia. Is that genetic? There's a lot of that in my family, or stupidity as I like to call it, because I'm totes tolerant. What else is there in my family genetic? There was cancer. That's maybe not genetic, who knows? It's a mystery to me. Would that stop me having kids though? No. You don't think about ending a life or not bringing life into the world because of a defect you have. It does not guarantee the next generation will get it. Though she also enjoys her vagina exactly the way it is. Have you ever heard of cesarean? Equally, Pritchard has suffered from depression throughout his life and lives with type 1 insulin-dependent diabetes. It would be cruel of me to enforce a child to suffer the same. As medicine is progressing and improving, I don't think that's a valid or totally valid argument. But it is your decision nonetheless. For 28-year-old Andy, who chooses not to identify as a specific gender and uses the pronoun they, the choice stems from something stronger. My mother was a really violent person and I was excommunicated from her at a young age. I'm scared of having kids and turning into her because motherhood was quite a cruel thing for me. I don't want my kids to go through the same experience. I think this is terrible what you went through. Truly terrible. But the fact that that scares you, that potential scares you, keeps you centered. I can relate. I promise you I can. I grew up in a period of time when people were still allowed to beat their children when they did wrong. The wooden spoon was a preferred one. I remember talking about this in streams with people. It really was not nice. And that fear made me a much softer person, a nicer person. I may not sound like it, I know, but it is true. Andy was sterilized last year and says it's the best decision they've ever made. It's massively improved my mental health and dysphoria. No one ever stops people from having children, so why don't you stop someone who doesn't want children? That's a very interesting discussion. And I truly think that if we are to fund sterilization under circumstances of not wanting children, or how about this? In my country, if you don't want children, you should be allowed to apply and you should go through a set of procedures and it should be scrutinized. I think it should be, because it is a path where you can't come back. And I think if you choose to not want to have kids, rather than stopping people from having kids, I think you should pay for it. And that's going to get me lots of thumbs down, I'm sure. But I think there are certain procedures like that. Not like that's the only one like it. But there are certain procedures I believe should not be funded by the taxpayer, but funded by the person who is making the personal choice to change something so drastically. But I also think there should be an age thing for this. I think maybe, because I think a lot of this comes down to life experience. And it sounds silly, but that's what I believe. But finding a doctor who will actually agree to the procedure is where the difficulty starts. It took Pritchard 11 years before the NHS gave in to his requests. As a man in his 20s, he's considered old enough to be the father of unlimited children without checking with anyone first. But to tell the NHS you genuinely don't want that ever, it becomes a rejected, defeated world of a long-term contraception, an assortment of tablets, injections and devices to achieve the same ends. Yeah, tough one, right? I mean, who'd ever thought to double up on those condoms? My first doctor, who is now retired, definitely fed me some bullshit made-up statistics about how 90% of people who have a vasectomy regrets their decisions. There is actually some basis in that, and I will leave a link to a source in the description that confirms it. Somewhat. It's like you're just telling me that because I'm 18 and you don't believe a word I'm saying. Actually, that's exactly it. It's surprising how fickle children, teenagers, and young adults are. It is incredibly unsurprising just how fickle children, teenagers, and young adults are. The stigma around simply not wanting children is huge, but it seems to be worse for women. There's societal pressures, sure, but a woman lacking any maternal instinct? That's a step too far for some. It's weird, heartless, and well, outright selfish. That's probably because the majority of people want to have kids. It's almost like it's in our biology. For Andy, who was born a woman, other people felt as strongly about the decision to be sterilized as they did. Oh, I hate saying they. People judge you. I've been back to hospital. I'm related to my procedure, and female doctors have lectured me on something I've already had done. Andy believes this resistance is a symptom of defined gender roles. Yes, you do. This idea that women have to settle down, get married, have children is quite a moral thing, isn't it? No, it's quite a normal thing. Life isn't just about reproduction. You are quite right, it's not just about that. But for the majority of people, you are such a minority, it's unreal. The majority of people, it becomes that. For me, it goes back to this patriarchal idea that gender is binary. Well, gender roles, there are only two at the moment realistically, the rest are. And I know someone's now going to say, gender and sex, you get it wrong, Omegon, fuck you, cunt. I know. I'm still not convinced that gender fluid is real, and that just sounds like cum. Where was I? Oh yes. For me, it goes back to this patriarchal idea that gender is binary, and within that you have to comply with set of or normal roles. I'm very much against that. There are some roles, yes, but you don't have to be against it. I'm going to confuse myself. Don't worry about that. Doesn't matter. Okay, so you have to comply with set or normal roles. I'm very much against that. Fine, rebel against the system, but don't destroy any possibility you could have of having children in the future. To what? Rage against the system of male and female gender roles. Grats. Becoming a parent isn't totally ruled out for Andy because, as they succinctly point out, there are other ways to have children that don't involve pushing them out through your uterus. That's quite right. Someone else can do it, or you can adopt. At the end of the day, I'd rather come to the end of my life and regret not having children than have children and regret my decision. I think if you ever had children and you regretted it, it tells me just how bad a parent you were. Although Caitlin doesn't have to worry about contraception until her IUD needs replacing in 4 years, she's 100% sure she'll get the procedure done. I just don't have a motherly bone in my body. That's fine. I'd rather you paid for it and you could convincingly prove enough medical officials that you genuinely don't want children. Although you could just turn up dressed like that. That might convince them. Oh, no, I said I wouldn't. No. Laura's outside, mate.
I'm contributing.
Let me in the door, you stupid
Do I throw this Molotov chat? Press 1 for yes.
Fuck's... Oi! I'm gonna die now. No, I'm not...
Okay, somebody else did. Oh my god, put up the runner.
Oh, that's perfect.
I need help anyway. Thanks, guys.
I was trying to help you.
That was unfortunate.
See, I wouldn't have hit the car alarm if I known you guys were incapable of getting inside.
I was in the room, remember? But I went out to help the person that you kept shutting the door on.